Boyd Epley, you're the founder of the National Strength and Conditioning Association. So tell us your story. How did it all start? What did you actually study, and how did you become the founder of the NSCA?
Well, I started out as an athlete for the University of Nebraska as a pole vaulter, and I got hurt. And so I had to go into their weight room, which was not a very impressive facility. In fact, the student weight room at the campus at the University of Nebraska was 3 or 4 times better than what the athletes had. And the athletes weren't encouraged to lift at all. It was something that people just weren't into. They just didn't believe in it at the time. But so when I got hurt and I needed to spend time in the weight room, I had a little experience as I came there from Arizona. I had gone to a health club to gain weight to play football. I wanted to gain about 20 pounds. And I went to a health club, and in that health club, as a junior in high school, there were bodybuilders, there were power lifters, and there were Olympic lifters. And those are kind of the sports that are in across the country that people participate in. So I got a chance to see and look at kind of what's out there. And even though I was only in there 2 months, I gained 20 pounds, which is what I was trying to do, and it helped my football career. But I also learned a little bit about each of those areas, and kind of piqued my interest in that. But then I got a scholarship to the University of Nebraska to pole vault, and of course I got an injury. I did break the school record right away in the first meet, but then got hurt and went to the weight room to kind of rehabilitate myself, and I was really disappointed. They had one universal gym machine and one set of Olympic weights.
Wow.
And that was it. But the student weight room in a different building had much more than that because they had weight training classes. And so, and at the end of the day, they had open recreation. So I would go over to the student weight room in the evenings because it was open to students, where the athletic weight room didn't have enough equipment, and it wasn't even, the people weren't using it.
Wow.
And I was a physical education major, and so the people involved asked me, because I had some experience that other people maybe didn't, they asked me to kind of oversee it in the evenings, and then eventually asked me to teach weight training classes. And so I actually got started in the physical education department rather than the athletic department so much.
How old were you by then?
I was a junior in college,
mm-hmm.
so 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was spending time in both, in the athletic weight room and in the student weight room. And I taught those classes for maybe 17 years, something like that, before the athletic department said, enough of that, we want you to be here all the time. So I split my time between those and actually encouraged the athletes to take those classes. So the football players could take a class, and I was the instructor, and they'd get a 1-hour credit, and if they did well, they got an A, which would, of course, help their grade average. And then I even had an advanced weightlifting class. And so they could get the beginning and the advanced, get 2-hour credit and get a good grade. So that helped everybody that way.
I bet.
And we had about 180 football players at the time. And so we had a class called winter conditioning, and they got a 1-hour credit for that. And so I was helping the grade average of the football players
mm-hmm.
by having these courses available to them, but more importantly, helping them physically. And because they had never lifted before, they just had no program at all. It was non-existent. The student weight room was far superior to what the athletes had. But the people in charge of the Department of Athletics were open to my suggestions. And so they expanded the weight room immediately by taking a wall down. and that about tripled the size of the space. But I told them, now we don't have enough equipment. And they said, well, what do we need? Make a list. So I brought them a list, and they ordered everything.
Wow.
So the money wasn't really an issue. It was more that they just didn't have the program. They just weren't into it yet.
And the lack of knowledge.
Yeah, weren't aware of it. But they were very receptive. And so I just kept knocking walls down and expanding the weight room every direction I could until one day I saw my athletic director and the head football coach walking around looking at spaces. And I knew something was up, so I asked, what are you guys doing? They said, we're looking for a place to put the visiting team locker room because the one we have is so bad that they complain after a football game. The next day in the paper, they're complaining about how bad our locker room is. So I said, you mind if I walk with you? And so they said, sure, So they walked underneath the West Stadium where the stands were for the football stadium, and there was about a 30,000 square foot space there where what's called the job pool had just moved out of. The job pool were carpenters, electricians, welders for the university. So they did projects all over the campus, and they moved closer to where there was a railroad access. And this space was available. And I said, well, I'd like to have this space. And the athletic director says, you would take this space? I said, because it was terrible, wasn't painted or anything. It was just in pretty bad shape. I said, well, if you help me fix it up, pay me or provide some money that I can fix this up, I think it would be tremendous. He said, okay, you got it. So we inherited a space, and we did have to take one wall down, which then made it the largest weight room in the country.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. You name it. Because when we see, here in Germany, we see just like videos or reels on social media or pictures actually of those strength and conditioning in the gyms they have, like in the NFL or whatsoever. And it's crazy what they have nowadays and how large areas they have and how many athletes they can train at the same time. And it's so interesting to hear your story, where you started and where we at now. That is amazing. So how do you feel? What are your emotions when you think about your first days in that business and how it was growing over the last years?
Well, of course, I'm very proud of how it turned out. But when you're involved, you aren't thinking about all that kind of thing. You just do what you think you need to. And when we got this huge space, it took them 2 years to clean it up, paint it, carpet it, and get it ready for me. And at that time, the university had a rule you could only have a $100,000 project at a time. And this was a $200,000 project. So it took me 2 years before I could actually get into the space. They used up the $100,000 the first year and then carpeted it and painted it, and then we were able to move in. And so I went back to the football coach and I said, all right, this space is going to be fabulous, but now we need more equipment. He said, what do you need? And I said, well, we need about $60,000. He said, just a minute. He went and made a phone call. He came back and he said, I got you 90,000.
Is that enough?
Yeah, and I only needed 60. So we were able to do little extras, and we opened probably the largest weight room in the country, maybe in the world, at about 30,000 square feet.
That is amazing. And when did the idea of founding the National Strength and Conditioning Association, when did all that start?
Well, that officially started in 1978, but in 1976, I got invited to Santa Monica, California, to judge the Mr. America competition because I had a hand in bodybuilding, powerlifting, and Olympic lifting in order to learn everything I could. I competed for 3 years in all 3 of those, just to learn what's out there, how does it work. And I didn't get much from the bodybuilding, except for my trip to Santa Monica, California, to be a judge at the Mr. America competition. When I was out there, I got a different impression of bodybuilding, because these people were on so many steroids and so many drugs. They were almost like freaks. And I was about to be asked to be the national physique chairman, because for 3 years I was involved in learning everything I could about that industry, powerlifting and Olympic lifting, all those. Ralph Countryman was resigning. He was older, and he was resigning as the national physique chairman, and asked me if I would replace him. And I went there with the understanding I was going to check it out, see. And I was so disappointed in bodybuilding, the culture, the people, and what they represent. It's a big drug mess. Most of these guys were on drugs, steroids, and it was not a normal situation. It was not anything like what I was doing at Nebraska, a completely different environment. And so I turned down that opportunity. And that was in 1976. And then I thought, well, I still like and appreciate what's going on in weightlifting and powerlifting. The bodybuilding I don't want anything to do with. But after that experience. So I came back and focused on those areas, of powerlifting and Olympic lifting. And I got to meet a lot of different people by competing in those meets. And one guy from Penn State University, I gave a speech there, and he said, we need to get more organized. We need to get together, and we need to share ideas. And he was all about having an association or a group where we could get together and share ideas. But then he never came to the first meeting. It's kind of funny. He had the emphasis to get me to do this, but then he
didn't show up.
He didn't show up. I never did. It's kind of funny how it worked. So what I did, I said, well, let me find out who is out there, who is in America, who has an interest in this. Because it's not weightlifting, and it's not powerlifting, and it's not bodybuilding I'm after. I'm after finding out who's involved with training athletes. So because I worked at the university, they had mailing lists. They had every high school in the state of Nebraska's address, and they had every college in the nation's address. And so I asked if I could use those and send a letter out to all the colleges and high schools, asking kind of who's out there, and had a form that they could fill out, identifying their name, and I asked what kind of equipment they had for strength training, and how many sets of weights and so forth. You kind of explain what you've got, and thousands of people sent those back to me.
Wow.
And so then I put together a directory. In 1977, I put together the National Strength Coaching Directory, and it listed all these schools, colleges and high schools, and a little bit about the equipment that they had, whatever they had sent in. I put it in this little directory. And I sold that directory for $10, and only sold about 1,000 of them. Mm-hmm. But that was a start to get unified across the country. And then people they would start calling me and saying, well, the directory was okay, but we need to get together. We need to get together and party and, exchange ideas and mostly get drunk and have fun.
That's always part of a good networking, right?
Yeah. And so, and they wanted me to do the work, of course, because I was the one that's doing the work. But I wasn't so sure about doing that. I thought, well, maybe we can just have a meeting with the national trainers. The National Athletic Trainers Association has a conference each year, and it already exists. maybe we could just go to their conference. Well, they didn't want to do that. The trainers aren't strength coaches. It's a different profession, that whole different deal. They said, we want you to have a convention. So we'll come to Lincoln. So I did. And I invited the people that were available to come, and we created the strength coaching organization. It was called the National Strength Coaches Association. A few years later, the name of the organization was changed to National Strength and Conditioning Association. And that change came about because there were more fitness-minded people in the industry than strength coaches. And I wasn't really excited about that part, because fitness-minded people are not necessarily what I was into. But we have thousands of them in the National Strength and Conditioning Association now. But the association's original name was National Strength Coaches. We had to change that because there's so many fitness-minded people that wanted to be a part of it.
Wow. That is an amazing story. And that just leaves me with saying thank you for all you did, for your passion, your work, your bravery, and all you put into that, so we can enjoy a convention like this here in Germany and Munich, and for everything you did for this generation of strength and conditioning coaches.
It's
Thank
been
you so much.
An honor to see what has developed. It's just amazing.